This hourly segment is brought to you by Secure Retirement Radio with host Raj Shah. Sunday mornings at 7 on AM 560, The Answer.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The cultural Marxism, that's just a celebration of diversity. It's completely harmless and innocent. As, for example, in the trans rights movement, completely harmless and innocent. It was a cold Friday night in January when Sherry Laurie, director of the Hope Center, Christian homeless center and homeless shelter in downtown Anchorage, Alaska, was called down to the floor to deal with a disruptive man in a nightgown who was very inebriated with a big gash down his face. Laurie recognized the man whom she had seen in men's clothing before. She tells me she told the National Review author by phone, right up here by Madeline Kearns at National Review. Though the individual professes a female gender identity, he was over 6 feet tall and very large, and Laurie was in no doubt about his sex. Though the Hope Center serves both men and women during daytime hours, its overnight facilities are reserved for females only, and then only women who are sober and who have been determined to be non-threatening. This is owing to the vulnerability of the women the Hope Center serves. They've often come out of extremely abusive situations, said the director, including sex trafficking and domestic violence. Laurie, the director here, Sherry Laurie, recalls one time assisting a woman who had been held captive and whose captors had set her backpack on fire and she was burned, for example. She explains the Hope Center staff at night, all female, are often first responders. It's absolutely critical that this particular service remains single-sex, said Laurie. She later learned that before being turned away from the Hope Center, the male in the nightgown was in a fight at another shelter. So she made the right call. Not so, says the Anchorage Equal Rights Commission, arm of the local government there. A week after the incident, that Civil Rights Commission notified Laurie that they were investigating a complaint against the Hope Center on behalf of the individual she had sent to the hospital, this man in a nightgown, claiming that there's a allegation worth investigating that the Hope Center had been discriminating against people based on sex and gender identity. A claim that the Hope Center disputes and now is in litigation represented by the Alliance Defending Freedom with the city of Anchorage. Abused women have to be, their security, safety, comfort sacrificed on the pyre of trans politics and the minders who enforce trans politics. This op-ed from J. Keck, USA Today. My daughter thinks she's transgender. Her public school undermined my efforts to help her. He writes, in April of 2016, my then 14-year-old daughter became convinced she was my son. In my attempt to help her, her public school undermined me every step of the way. Mr. Keck writes about his daughter that she was doing fine, no sign she wanted to be a boy. She had difficulty forming and maintaining friendships. The parents later learned that she was on the autism spectrum. And what happened in terms of his daughter's change of mind on the topic, at her high school, my daughter was approached by a girl who had recently come out in school as transgender. Shortly after meeting her, my daughter declared that she, too, was a boy trapped in a girl's body and picked out a new masculine name. Without telling me or my wife, the school referred to her by her new name. They treated my daughter as if she were a boy, using male pronouns and giving her access to a gender-neutral bathroom. And the school essentially claimed their hands were tied by the law, though that wasn't true.
Yeah, that's not true.
A psychologist, speaking off the record that they sent their daughter to, said what Brown University researchers found, that this whole trans thing, particularly at young, vulnerable ages, there's a huge social contagion aspect to it. Now, of course, that Brown University study was excoriated by the cultural Marxists in academia who are not interested in science, they're interested in politics. Jay Keck is a member of the Kelsey Coalition, promotes policies to protect young people from what the organization considers the medical and psychological harms of transgender medicine. He's also the Chicago leader of Parents of ROGD Kids, a support group for parents who have children suddenly identifying as transgender. And he joins us now. Mr. Keck, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
So I'm interested in this parents group, particularly since you're here in suburban Chicago. Um, without obviously breaking any confidences, what are some of the issues you found in your experience that you now find are common among parents with kids that are similarly situated, and how the schools and other civic institutions are treating you and your role as the child's parent as compared to how they decide that the child should be treated?
Well, with the parent group, what you find out pretty quickly is there's most parents have a very similar story in this group, and that their child, for whatever reason, suddenly came to a realization that they were transgender, and they also share stories that these kids, mostly girls, but sometimes they're boys, are struggling with some pre-existing mental health conditions. So it's a story that gets repeated over and over again as far as what the backdrop is of their child.
Yeah.
And most people share similar stories to me, that their schools, they adhere to or choose to follow the instant affirmation model. And if the child says they're transgender, there's absolutely no questioning about it, and they go along with it. They actually celebrate it in many cases, and they leave the parents in the dark in most cases as well.
Well, how did you fight back, you and your wife?
Well, when I found out what they had done, we called a meeting immediately with the school and the administrative staff, and told them of our wishes in no uncertain terms, that she would be referred to by her legal name. And in the meeting, they said that that was our right to request that. And it was in the OpEd. They said it was our right, but they chose not to follow our direction, though. And again, behind our backs, continue to go against our wishes. Really, the only reason we found out that they were doing that was later on in the school year. There was a parents' day where the parents can join the kids in a class for the day, and the school teachers were worried about what would happen if we showed up to that. That they'd be found out what they were doing.
Do other parents in this group, do you find you're getting pressured, not just in the sense that school officials that have some dominion over your kids during the school day are acting against your wishes, but you're getting pressured from the school, from parents, the social circles in particular communities, to just go along with the program?
Certainly from the schools. I don't know if there's other parents that necessarily. I think there's a large swath of America that has no idea this is going on.
Yeah.
So there wasn't so much from individual parents at the schools, but certainly the school itself, the social worker for sure. They thought, they thought what our position was just morally wrong, and he couldn't be more adamant about that.
Mm-hmm. And the issue that we've seen too, you mentioned sort of this is being celebrated at school. We see it celebrated on morning shows where you have pre-pubescent children, dancing around for the audience's entertainment in drag. There's Charlize Theron has talked about treating her child in a way that he or she identifies. I can't remember which direction, but also talking about at a very young age starting to change their physiology with hormone treatments and the like. I mean, are you concerned at all about the intervention medically by school district here?
Oh, well, absolutely. So, it's important for everyone to understand that from the medical aspect, there's been no long-term studies done on treating children or, teens, young adults with these cross-sex hormones, blockers. And there literally is no long-term studies being done. And then you have states like Oregon that has lowered the medical consent age to 15, meaning a child can go to Oregon and get these treatments without their parents' consent. So, it seems to be putting a lot of children in harm's way, and the train that's been difficult to stop.
There was a case over the last couple of years in Palatine District 211 about locker room usage, right, and whether a boy could effectively a biological boy could have used the girls' locker room, and their parental opposition and so forth, and the school district made some accommodation of sorts. It seems like a lot of parents who fought the boy in the girls' locker room felt like they're sort of alone and they're sort of overwhelmed by the where the culture is on the topic. And it does
Yeah.
this sort of parents group give you guys a little bit of strength in numbers and perhaps more leverage to push back to say I'm not and courage for people within the group to push back to say I'm not alone. It's happening to other people. It's not right, and we're going to assert our rights.
Yeah, well, it certainly gives you more courage because when new people join the group, which happens pretty frequently, what's commonly heard is that they felt like they were all alone out there. And, then they join a group of parents in the exact same situation. And, it's very comforting to have a group to talk with. And you can talk openly and not worry about repercussions. So it definitely helps, and it does give you courage to be able to continue and advocate for your child. The trans lobby is very powerful and well funded, and it's a difficult fight, but in the end, hopefully, we'll follow other countries that are starting to push back a little bit and do some studies, and to really see what's going on and what's driving this rapid increase in kids and young adults, suddenly coming to the realization that they're transgender.
Jay, how many people are in your group, and is the number growing?
It's growing. It's a group that hasn't really been advertised that much, but we have about 20 parents in the group now, and I'm probably getting it's on a monthly basis. We're getting more people join, and that's just a Chicago area group. There's probably groups in most states now in the United States, and there's groups now outside the United States as well. So,
Did you ever think of yanking your child out of that school because of how they took control and how they took the power over the parenting?
Well, the question is where to go. The only solution to that would be homeschooling, because the likely scenario is any other school, if it was a public school, would do exactly the same thing. So certainly thought about it. There were some other situations going on that I can't really get into that precluded that. But if I were to do it all over again, I would be considering homeschooling very strongly.
From your experience and then the experiences that you've shared and learned about from other families, do you have like best practices or lessons learned for other parents who are listening who may be going through the same thing?
Well, to get in front of it, if that's what they're confronted with. I mean, you have to walk a fine line. You have to support your child on one hand, but you also have to be a parent and make sure that's following the best possible course for them. Now, there probably are some children that, need to go the drastic route of transition. I mean, I'm not going to say those people don't exist. I'm sure they do. I just think because of the experimental nature of that treatment, caution is in order. and you need to explore it deeply, and to, when you work with therapists, to absolutely pre-screen them very strongly. Don't couch your words. You really need to know where the therapist stands on that.
He is Jay Keck. He is a member of the Kelsey Coalition, which promotes policies to protect young people from what the organization considers the medical and psychological harms of transgender medicine. He's also the Chicago leader of Parents of ROGD Kids, a support group for parents who have children suddenly identifying as transgender. He has a piece in OpEd in the USA Today that I've tweeted out about what he and his family went through with his daughter. And Jay, thanks for joining us, and thank you for your courage in sharing your story in USA Today as sort of a warning for other families around the country. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we